Well, welcome everyone to today's msexchange.org webinar, another in a series of regular informational webinars hosted by msexchange.org. Many of you who frequently attend these events know that eNow Software is one of our more frequent sponsors who allow us to offer this regular series of webinars, and we want to thank them for their ongoing support. eNow is a Microsoft Silver independent software vendor focused on helping organizations implement the latest Microsoft technologies. eNow Systems Management Software provides monitoring and reporting features for all key components of your Microsoft infrastructure, including Exchange, Office 365, Active Directory, SharePoint, and Lync, all delivered in eNow's award-winning dashboards. I'm Roger, and I need to let you know that we are recording today's event, and all participant lines are muted, so if you need any assistance, please use either the questions feature or the chat panel or the raise hand, whichever you prefer, and I'll try to give you assistance. As usual, we encourage your questions and your comments to help make this as interactive as possible, so please use the questions panel to submit any questions or comments you have during the presentation, and we'll address as many of those as possible at the end. And as one last note, eNow will be giving away a free Office 365 Turbo Kit at the end of today's presentation, and our speaker will share additional details with you on that. So many of you will recognize our speaker today as one of our leading go-to experts for everything MS Exchange related. Michael van Hornenbeck is a Microsoft Certified Solutions Master and Exchange Server MVP from Belgium, and he works for eNow as Director of Product Research. Michael specializes in Exchange, Office 365, Active Directory, and a bit of Lync. He is an active contributor to the MS Exchange community by writing articles for several tech websites, his own blog, and by participating in the UC Architects podcast. In addition to that, he frequently speaks at various international conferences, including TechEd, IT Dev Connections, and the Microsoft Exchange Conference. So Michael, thank you for making time in your busy schedule to join us today, and I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me today. And hi, everyone. Thanks for being on this webinar. So there's a lot of people that registered for today, especially I think it's because of the title, and the future of Exchange is kind of heavy loaded. So let's go over the agenda for today and kind of discuss what we're going to talk about. So first of all, when I talk about the future of Exchange, it still is Exchange 2013 that we're talking about today, but we will be taking a look at what is coming for Exchange 2013, at least for what we know that is coming for Exchange 2013. Then we'll take a look at what is coming into Exchange 2016. As you all know, Microsoft has a little bit about what Exchange 2016 will look like at Ignite. And what I did is I took some of the highlights of things that I remember from all those presentations and distilled them into a presentation where we will go over them and then discuss why they are relevant, why this is important to you. We'll also talk about the preferred architecture for Exchange 2016 and why I think it really matters or should matter. And of course, there's only so much that we can do in the time that we have today, but I really want to cover a lot of ground here, these technologies. We'll talk about Exchange Online and the future of Exchange Online, how that kind of rolls into everything and what it means to you guys. Exchange administrators. We'll have some time for Q&A, and I'll also briefly talk a few minutes about what we at eNow do for Exchange, or specifically what we do for Exchange 2013, what we will be doing for Exchange 2016, and how that will look like in the future. This being said, let's go on and start digging into the content. So, Exchange 2013-ish. The reason why I call it 13-ish because anything here, applies to 2013, but is very likely, if not surely, also applicable to Exchange 2016, and that makes sense, right? I'd rather look at these announcements or these features that we're going to talk about as things that are going to be in Exchange 2016 and have been backported or will be backported to Exchange 2013. Because for the foreseeable future, both versions will still be used out in the wild. This being said, 2013 is definitely not the only version that's out there. There's a lot of people on 2010, and still a considerable amount on 2007, and not to mention amount of people on earlier version than that, but these will definitely not partake in anything that I'll be talking about today. But just to let you know. Anyway, so one thing I definitely remember was during the presentation I did with Timothy Heaney from Microsoft is the standalone hybrid configuration wizard and why that is important. Well, today, when you build a hybrid deployment, you have several options, right? You've got Exchange 2010, you've got Exchange 2013, and the latter option is definitely much better experience for an administrator, for an end user, because of all the features that are available. However, for those who are in a hybrid deployment, or for consultants on the call who have been deploying hybrid deployments for a while, you also noticed that last year and the years before that, there were some quirks setting up a hybrid deployment. More notably that, a few times last year, Microsoft had some issues that, prevented from successfully running the hybrid configuration wizard. The reason that being is that in the backend, being Office 5, the speed of innovation is incredibly high, much higher than any organization on premises would be able to sustain. And as a result, the problem that they were seeing is that changes in Office 365 were not only affecting Office 365, of course, but they were also starting to affect how the on-premises experience would be like if you are in a hybrid deployment or if you were trying to set up a hybrid deployment. More specifically, the hybrid configuration wizard bits are part of the Exchange server binaries. So if you're in Exchange 2010 hybrid deployment or the HCW, then you're using the bits for that version of Exchange that you're running. So, considering that you're maybe running the latest version of Exchange, that's awesome. It means that you're running at the latest service pack level or cumulative update level, and that you'll have the latest available bits for the hybrid configuration wizard. But now, consider a scenario where you are running maybe the latest version of the cumulative update. So today that would be CU9 for Exchange 2013. And Microsoft decides to roll out a new feature in Office 365 which might affect the hybrid experience, and you try running the hybrid configuration wizard and it fails. Well, it fails because the on-premises bits have not been updated yet to reflect any changes in Office 365. Needless to say, you kind of get the picture here that the speed at which to innovate in Office 365 definitely has an impact here. So the new standalone hybrid configuration wizard, and don't quote me on the name, it's the name that we've used at Ignite. It could get a more interesting name later perhaps, but the standalone hybrid configuration wizard kind of takes away that problem by taking out the hybrid configuration wizard from the on-premises bits. So anyone who has set up hybrid 2013 and did that for a 2013 only environment, you might have noticed that at the end of the hybrid configuration wizard, there's that new link that appears or a button that appears that says configure, which will configure OAuth for you. Well, what that button actually does is it opens up a wizard which is hosted by Microsoft, and then that wizard interacts with your server to set up OAuth on your server and in Office 365. Well, similar to how that wizard is ran for OAuth, the new hybrid configuration will be like that, which means that you will still have the hybrid link in the Exchange Admin Center, and when you click to run the hybrid configuration wizard, it would actually load the wizard from a website in Microsoft's data centers. As a result, because Microsoft has full control over that wizard, you will always run the latest bits, which means that any change they make to functionality in Office 365 will immediately have its, or will allow them to immediately update the HCW bits that they are hosting for you. And so anytime you run the HCW, it'll be at the latest version that they need for you to be able to set up hybrid, which is of course great, because if you're in an on-prem version, then if there's something wrong, they either have to release a hotfix or an interim update, or maybe you'll have to wait until the next cumulative update comes around before you can rerun the HCW, which means delays in a project and so forth and so on. So of course this is great news. And this, to me, was a really important change because this shows how the cloud, which some people still mention too as something really dark, is affecting on-premises, but in a positive way. If you decided to go hybrid and if you decided to stay on-premises, which is fine, then you are now relying on the cloud and more on the cloud to make that on-premises functionality or the on-premises experience better, which of course is a good thing. Now, this being said, some questions I was asked after Ignite and at Ignite as well is, is it valid for 2013? Yes, also 2016, but you won't be able to write it on 2010. So there is no way of upgrading 2010, and which is kind of logical because it's in extended support. And if you're looking at upgrading over time, then 2013 or 16 is the way to go anyway. Can you opt out of the new HCW experience? So from what I heard at Ignite, that will not be a possibility, which makes sense. That way Microsoft doesn't have to entertain two versions, a full on-prem version and one that they host. So that kind of seems logical here. And I'm not speaking on behalf of Microsoft, of course, but just presenting my views and the things that I heard about that. So it's definitely something to keep in mind. For the more security-related, or the security-worthy people here, of course, because you are now querying a wizard that's hosted on the internet, there will be an additional endpoint that you'll have to whitelist on your outbound proxy or firewall, but it's not an additional endpoint which isn't known today. The configure.office.com is used as well for the OAuth configuration wizard, so it already exists today and is something you could test today. Will that new HCW change anything of what you did before? The question is, it depends. Of course, first of all, I'd say no, because the HCW that you will be running from the cloud will be the same HCW that you run on premises. But will it change any settings? Well, if you use it to change settings, of course it will, but it will only change whatever you want it to. So it's not some darker magic going on there. It's still the same HCW that you're used to today, but you're running it from a different scenario, different place, and it will definitely be up to date by the time you run it, which myself running Intuition a few times last year, I applaud this change really loudly. So this is number one feature I remember. Number two is something that a lot of people were waiting for, but the support for running Exchange on Azure, right? Infrastructure as a service. It has been hanging around for a while, and is it interesting? Well, first of all, let's take a look at running Exchange on Azure. When is it supported? Well, if you do it for lab testing, of course, it is supported. If you want to use it as a cluster witness for a DAG, the file share witness in Azure has been supported for a while before, but kind of reinforced at Ignite. And you cannot run Exchange in Azure in production if you are running Azure Premium Storage, right? Premium Storage are the nice SSD you're getting in Azure, and it's not so much for an IOPS point of view, because we all know that Exchange 2013 and later, they don't require a lot of IOPS to run. They're latency sensitive, which means that the problem they had before, as I understand it, is that the disks that are presented by Azure, the regular disks, they don't guarantee a certain access time to the disks, which could cause problems in Exchange, whereas the Azure Premium Storage, they always guarantee a certain latency to the disks as well. So that's a good thing, right? The question is, do you want to run Exchange in Azure? And I have a really, really good quote here from one of my MVP friends. Jeff Gay said at Ignite that Exchange on Azure is for people with more money than sense, and that resonates really well with me. And the reason for that being is, well, why would you? First of all, in my opinion, again, my views here, there's limited use cases. I can see a few use cases for running Exchange in there. For instance, if you have a shop that is fully Office 365, they used to be hybrid, or they're still hybrid, but they have that one management server that you still need today, then maybe you can host that management server in Office 365 in Azure, right? Which kind of makes sense. But on the other hand, if you really want a hosted Exchange solution, wouldn't it be better to choose Office 365 because you get more functionality, you don't have to worry about the servers and so forth and so on. I mean, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense, especially if you take a look at the cost. And it's a rudimentary, comparison here because there's much more at play. But, when you take a look at the premium storage, it's about $60 per month for 112 gigs, which is a lot of storage for an Exchange server. You must use the DS series virtual machines, which get to about $800 per month, list price, of course. So, adding up all that, running a fully fledged environment in Azure can be quite costly at the end of the month. Probably more costly than running in Office 365. So again, the question is, what is your use case? I'm not arguing that there aren't any, but to me there are many. So again, keep it in mind, it is possible now, and it's great. I mean, I love the fact that there is more flexibility, that you can choose whatever fits your deployment best, whatever fits your needs best. So that's definitely a good thing, but just keep that in mind. So this being said, those were the two things that I remembered from Ignite. Of course, there are some other stuff as well, but in light of time, let's move on to what has been announced for Exchange 2016. Now, typically, over the past few years, I would dive into architectural changes here. I would talk to you about, hey, look at what cool new architecture changes have been made in Exchange 2016 and how you benefit from it. But today, I'm going to take a little bit of a different approach. I want to talk to you about what value Exchange 2016 can bring to you, and pay very good attention to the very first few slides, because I'm going to use those slides again towards the end of the presentation. So one of the things that I found really interesting is the new collaboration features. Those are unlocked by Exchange, but mainly also by Outlook, right? Using Outlook 2016, using that with Exchange, using that with partially in the cloud, OneDrive and all that. The fact that you can use these cloudy attachments, as they call them, where you can attach a file, and instead of having to save a file on your computer, then go to Outlook, then click attach a file, then browse to the location where you saved the file, and then select that file and send it over. You could now just go into Outlook 2016, click that, take the last item you had, the recent items list, which we all know from Word and Excel and all that. Just select it, and it'll add to the email, and then you can choose whether or not you want to add it as an attachment, which means that the the file will be really added as an attachment to the email. You can choose to upload it to the SharePoint library, OneDrive place, a hosted space, where you will actually be sending a sort of link through that email. But the good thing about that is that it allows you to send the attachment without sending the attachment, so it's not a heavy email, and you can allow people to, if you send it out to a larger group of people, for instance, 10 people in your work group, then you send them one link. Everyone is working on that same document on the same place. You can even lock down permissions from within the client. Now, I don't know how you guys feel about this, but to me, this is a huge time saver. In preparation of this meeting, I kind of looked at how many times a day I send attachments, I collaborate on a document, and it's well over 10 to 20 times, where each time, let's just round it out to about 1 minute. It's about 20 minutes a day. I just do clicking to get the right documents attached to an email, or right version. Not to mention, every time I send along a new version or I ask people for input, I get 3 other files v1, person X made his comments in document Y, and so forth and so on. It's just a mess. So I really like this feature because it allows me to be more productive, kind of focus on what I'm doing here. Very much like in Exchange 2013, I remember really well when that was released, one of the biggest features, or the nicest features I found in Outlook 2013, was the inline reply. Just being able to have, hit the reply button and not have a new window pop up. That was a revelation to me because it was less intrusive. And I know I'm being kind of sentimental here, but it really is, focusing on what matters, because from an IT perspective, yes, I'm a geek. I'm going to be brutally honest. I'm a geek. I love Exchange from an architecture point of view, and I love to play with those servers. But at the same time, my job is to make sure that the end user are getting the best experience, and that's what I look forward to in the newer versions here. So kind of let you know, these screenshots, by the way, were taken from a presentation from Microsoft. So that's where you might know them from. But again, if you choose to add an attachment, you can upload it and share it with OneDrive, send it an attachment. Really easy. Now, in the back end, when we're talking about the on-premises scenario here, some of this is fueled by what is called the Office server. The Office server is kind of the Office document rendering service, if you will, for reading documents in, for instance, OWA. So we've had that feature for quite a while that you could open up and read attachments in Exchange in other web app, for instance. The problem is that over the past few years, that component, the web-ready document viewing, has caused some issues, security issues mainly. And what happens now is that in Exchange 2016, if you want to have the best experience for your end users, you'll have to deploy an Office server along with Exchange. It's not a requirement from a pure technical point of view, meaning that you could do without, but then you won't be able to do side-by-side view, as the screenshot shows you here. But it's a component that allows you to, give your users the ability to read an email or an attachment to an email, write in the web browser side by side of the email, make some edits there, add it to the email again, and send it off. Save time again, right? The way that the Office Web App Server works is, for anyone who is familiar with the WAC server or the Office Web App Server today, kind of similar. There are some differences, of course, but the way that it works now is it's using OAuth to communicate with Exchange, and the Office server. If you decide to deploy the Office server, will definitely have an impact on how you will be deploying Exchange or how the overall architecture of Exchange will look like, and I will discuss that when we get to the architectural point, right? So of course that's something to keep in mind. Other enhancements, search enhancements. In one of the presentations, they finally said, Outlook, when it is online, it will start using the search on the Exchange server side, which I think is a really good thing, because right now Outlook uses its on-premises indexing part, which means that files in your offline folder or in your offline cache are being indexed by the computer. And if you do a search in Outlook, it uses that index. And only if you click the search more button will actually go out to server and get more results. But overall, search being faster from a client perspective and user perspective, being more similar to what you see if you would run a query in OWA would definitely good thing. Another thing that you will be having in Exchange 2016 OWA, combination of all that is that when you start typing, you will get suggestions, right? If you start typing a name, you'll get the names of the people that you work with, that you interact with most on top. So it'll give you suggestions, again, all in all, to make sure that you have a better experience. Other enhancements include not only the side-by-side view, but the inline previews for URLs and videos, inline replies in OWA, a single button to archive messages, weather view, which is really insanely gimmicky, I'd say, but it's interesting. Single line view for messages in OWA. A lot of improvements from a GUI perspective and how users work with it. So it's really interesting. So keep all these things in mind, because we'll talk about them a little bit later when we get to the end of the presentation. Okay, so let's talk architecture, right? There must be something in Exchange 2016 that changed from an architectural point of view. Well, some key points. An evolution. It's not a revolution, which is a good thing, because revolution means a lot of work, usually means a lot of pain. So I like the fact that it's similar to Exchange 2013, but that it's kind of the lessons learned version of Exchange 2013. Of course, Microsoft has been running that in 2013 in Office 365 for a while, and they've been very successful at it, but undoubtedly they've seen some things, right? Running it at that scale, and the lessons learned have been, have kind of trickled into the Exchange 2016 bits. That's what we're getting. At the same time, there is one major architectural change now that Mailbox and CAS are being combined in a single server role again, which means there is no option to deploy two server roles, which is honestly, as a consultant, a good thing, because when I would go talk to a customer and tell them, hey, you know what, I'm going to deploy multi-role servers, then if you're lucky, your customer says, sure, let's multi-role, you're the expert. Sometimes you get into an environment and they have separate CAS and mailbox server, or in case of Exchange 2010, they would have separate CAS, separate hub, separate mailbox server, which when you take a look at how it was designed, Exchange as a software component, didn't really make a lot of sense, right? And especially when you start talking about high availability and the advantages of all that, there were very little use cases of splitting the roles apart. Now, to take away that discussion, it's not an option anymore, which is definitely good news. But the best news is for anyone already on Exchange 2013, coexistence will be so much better. I mean, so much better. And I'm not going to spoil how it will look like, but it's definitely a good thing there. So let's take a closer look at some of the other improvements. HA improvements, obviously there have to be HA improvements there. Foster DB corruption detection through a feature called database divergence detection. Basically, they will go out quicker and detect any sort of divergence, that's the word, in any database, passive copy in your DAG. Now, this being said, personally, I'm not sure how it is for you guys, but it's been a while, it's been a long time I've been facing any database corruption issues. So, anything they do to make it better is great, but personally, I haven't had any issues with it over the past few years. Database failovers are still faster now. They were already pretty fast in Exchange 2010. They were better in Exchange 2013, and they're even better in Exchange 2016. Of course, meaning less end user impact if a database has to fail over from one server to the other one. Loose truncation is a feature that already exists today, but just to reiterate what it does is it allows Exchange to make the decision to start truncate log files from an active copy or a passive copy if it runs out of disk space. Now, if that happens in a DAG where a passive database is down and the active database is filling up, because in a DAG, what would happen if if one passive copy would go down in Exchange 2013, all the other files would stop truncating the log files because all the other databases, because those log files are needed for log file shipping to keep, to bring that passive copy that temporarily failed maybe back up to speed. Well, in the end, if you wouldn't bring up that passive copy quick enough, you might run out of disk space on the active copy, which of course is something you don't want to. So this loose truncation helps you because it will start, deleting log files that it doesn't need from active copy, preventing it to actually run out of disk space, which is a good thing. Bad thing about this, maybe, is that the passive copy that that might have gone down, caused the log truncation to kick in, you'll have to reseed it because it doesn't have those missing log files that were deleted. But that's less of a problem than actually having a database go down. At least it is to me. Other things that were noted is support for EFS. An interesting article, by the way, by one of the MVPs, Michel Leroy. He did a quick comparison about performance on REFS versus NTFS, what we've been running for quite a while. Interesting results. Definitely urge you to read through that article. Definitely good. New DAG management service, which kind of coordinates things going on in the DAG, and the replay lag manager is now on by default. But what it does is, if you're in a architecture that uses a lagged copy, and I know I'm kind of talking to probably an audience where not a lot of people are using a lagged copy right now, but it's recommended in the default architecture, is that will automatically start playing down the lag if you're under a certain amount of active or healthy databases, or databases that you can actually use to fail over to. The purpose of this feature is to prevent a database of going down. So it rather plays down the lag of a lagged copy than having a database go down, which in a certain way makes sense. However, if you're the person that is using a lagged copy to at any time be able to get to a point in time, then obviously it's something you want to take a look into, because at that point you don't want Exchange to take the automated decision to to play down the lag, because then potentially you lose the lag time and you potentially lose the ability to go back in time using only the lagged copy. So there's definitely some discussions to be had when dealing with this. Other HA improvements, get mailbox server redundancy, new commandlet. The commandlet is very helpful, and I won't go into detail here but I'll use this example of what we're planning to do for Exchange 2016 in our product. But basically what it does, it helps you determine which servers can be rebooted, put in maintenance mode without affecting the DAG that you're running in, right? Another thing that they were doing from an HA perspective is limit the amount of databases that can be moved. Reasons for that being is that, especially in a large environment, not so much in a smaller environment, in a larger environment, people, a lot of people are working on the servers at the same time, and maybe you can force databases to move over from one server to the other one. Well, now you can implement policies that can actually, prevent databases to be moved from one server to the other one, to the other one, to the other one within a certain time frame, because even though you're moving over, not failing over, but you're moving over a database from one server to the other one, it always has a short or a small impact on the end user experience, of course, depending on your environment. But it's good that now you can control that behavior a little bit, and that's definitely good news for people who are managing Exchange in various areas, and various teams are working on it. It just helps from an organizational point of view. Other HA improvements, and all incremental stuff. It's not earth-shattering changes that change the view of the world, but auto reseed is still there. What Microsoft has seen, and that's actually a pretty good number, that auto reseed when a disk goes down, 99.99, that's what I heard, success rate for in Office 365, which is awesome, which means that the feature really kicks butt, which is good. But of course, if you're running Exchange virtualized, we'll talk about that briefly in a minute. It doesn't really make sense, right? Another improvement in auto reseed is that it now also fails over a disk or a volume if a single copy on that volume is failed, which previously it wouldn't do, because previously you have to have a failed disk to have it auto reseed on the spare disk that you configured. Well, now if a database is corrupted or goes down, or if it fails in a volume, then it will actually initiate an auto reseed of that entire volume somewhere else, which is good. So some security enhancements. In light of security becoming more and more important, it does support BitLocker. That's the way it's deployed in Office 365. And that makes a lot of sense if you're running Exchange according to the preferred architecture on a physical server where there's multiple databases on a single disk. Then the last thing you would want to is someone go into your data center, yank out a disk from one of the servers, and actually have a copy of the database on there. Doesn't mean they'll have easy access on the data on there, but there is potentially it opens the door up. If you encrypt those drives, then of course someone who yanks out a drive won't be able to get anything off the drive. So that's good news. Mailbox audit logging will be enhanced, similar to what you will see in Office 365. So if you want to know what it looks like, go and use the mailbox auditing feature in Office 365. DLP will be improved, new sensitive data types that come out of the box. You could, of course, still extend it yourself, create your own sensitive data types and so forth and so on. But it's always great to have more choice out of the box, which might or might not make the feature more usable for you. And then e-discovery and archiving improvements. And I'm just highlighting some of the things here because, again, there's only so much that we can talk about. But e-discovery will now also include public folder data. Yay! We've been trying to get rid of them for quite a while, but they're still there. To be honest, I kind of like the functionality public folders offer. I'm probably going to get lynched for making that statement, but anyway, they're there, and they're now included in e-discovery searches. And for those who attended one of the sessions about e-discovery, they showcased the integration with Equivio. It's a solution that Microsoft purchased that allows to do e-discovery searches more extensively than the e-discovery searches you can do today in Exchange. And then for shops that are heavily using e-discovery, that's definitely a good news. So, and it really looked really nice from a development point of view. So moving on quickly. No more MAPI CDO. I realize that this rumor has been around for quite a while, but it was Ross Smith that really said that this time it's gone. So if you want to do extensibility on Exchange, use modern ways of doing it using Exchange Web Services or maybe some of the new REST APIs. So if you've been working with Office 365, you'll notice that REST APIs have been in use there for quite a while. There's a bunch of REST APIs that they have available, and some of them, similar, will come to Exchange on premises. So the Mail, Calendar, and Contacts API that allow you to interact with email, calendar, and contacts, right, will be there. These REST APIs allow you to, create an application on pretty much any platform. It's a standard, so it's really, really helpful to develop all sorts of clients without taking into account limitations that other extensibility protocols had. And of course, because it's a REST API, it's granular scoped and allows you to work with the permissions to use your data and so forth and so on. This is also very important for organizations like ourselves, like making solutions to monitor Exchange, because the REST APIs allow us to do a better job at interacting with Exchange, which of course is only to a benefit of for our customers as well. So this being said, let's talk a little bit about the preferred architecture in Exchange 2016. To those who know what the preferred architecture is, it's Microsoft recommendation of how you should deploy Exchange. Does it mean that this is the only way to deploy Exchange? No. Honestly, there are many ways that you can deploy Exchange, but this is probably the best way to do it. And of course, coming from the people who designed the solution, it should carry a long, long way. This being said, let's dive a little bit into it, and you'll see that it's very similar to what you know from Exchange 2013. So first of all, from a namespace perspective, it should use the Unbound namespace model. I'll dive into the specifics of that in just a minute. But use the Unbound namespace model for auto-discover for email or protocol-specific entries, and for the Office server. And actually, the Office server should be in bound namespace, as it says there. Round robin, GeoDNS, load balancer, anything to distribute traffic across data centers is good. Of course, GeoDNS or any smart solutions that you have are better, but there is no specific requirement. Just round robin DNS would work as well. How that looks like is pretty similar to this. And I kind of took the slide from one of Microsoft's presentation because it's really easy to follow and it illustrates really well what it is. But imagine that your user is somewhere in the world, somewhere in North America, Europe, and you have data centers in that region. Then they will hit the endpoint, which you configure mail.mydomain.com. And then from there, they'll get one of two VIPs, the data centers, redundant data centers in the environment, and they'll connect to one of both. So imagine that the mailbox for that person is in the first data center, and you happen to have got the IP address of that first data center as the first entry from the DNS server. Then you'll connect to the first data center, connect to that mailbox server, be done with it. Imagine that you get the DNS entries for the data centers in a different order. So you get the IP address of the second data center first. Well, what happens is that you just connect to the second data center, and Exchange takes care of everything, just proxies the traffic across the WAN over to the other data center. And that's fully oblivious to the user, right? That's the word I was looking for. So for an end user, this works kind of seamless, right? From a global level, if you have multiple data centers, multiple regions, what you would have before is, Europe.mydomain and North America.mydomain. And for just for the record, the bound model where you have North America.mydomain or Europe or whatever namespace you want to use, that still works, right? But the best experience is if you use a simple namespace, a single namespace for your entire organization. And then, what happens is pretty similar. Users connect to that namespace. They connect to one of the data centers. And if you use GeoDNS, then obviously you can make sure that end users in America get an endpoint of a data center in America. If you're in Europe, get an endpoint of the data centers in Europe, of course. So, this can be aided a little bit by other technologies, but it's by far easiest from an end user perspective, because they only need to know, if at all, a single namespace, right? So this definitely makes a lot of sense, and it also enables some other features like the automatic side failovers and so forth and so on. Makes it easier. Load balancing, right, has been a topic heavily discussed in Exchange 2010, so much easier in Exchange 2013, and it is pretty similar for Exchange 2016. So in Exchange 2016, no affinity required. Basic, you could do layer 4 load balancing for all you know, but you can do layer 7, do some very cool stuff with it. But there's no specific affinity requirement, right? Every request can hit a different CAS server and it will find its way where it has to go, which is definitely good. Keep it simple is the message here. The difference is that now Exchange 2013 and 2016 can coexist in the same array, which we'll discuss in just a minute. From the Office server perspective, there is affinity required, so just keep that in mind that if you hit one of the Office servers in your array, if you're deploying multiple ones, then the session has to remain on that server. Right, so there's a little added complexity there, but how does these, the fact that Exchange 2013 and 2016 can coexist in the same array, how does that actually affect you? Well, it affects you from an implementation point of view, right? Again, this is a slide I took from Microsoft because it really illustrates really well what it is. But typically, what would happen is, you would deploy Exchange 2016 before, right? You would deploy Exchange 2016 in your environment, make sure that it's ready, and once the entire Exchange 2016 infrastructure is ready, or at least the parts that you had to, the client access server parts, I'd say, then you switch over the namespace to Exchange 2016. That's in the traditional model that we've been using for years, which means that there is a one-off change from version X to version Y. Now, because Exchange 2016 can coexist with 2013 in the same array because 2013 can proxy to 2016 servers, 2016 can proxy to 2013 servers, you can actually gradually add 2016 servers from a client access perspective, right? Can gradually add those servers into the environment, add them to the array, and then phase out the Exchange 2013 servers with no problem at all, which is definitely good news because now instead of doing that one-off where potentially something could go wrong and you'd have to revert all the changes, you can now add a server if it works really well, so forth on. And then as you add Exchange 2013 servers, you just phase out the Exchange 2013 CAS or CAS mailbox servers, multi-role servers, right? So that's definitely a huge improvement from that point of view. From a DAG design perspective, I'm going to fly over these slides a little bit quick here because nothing really much changed a lot. So still, 2 sites, DAG across 2 sites. If you want to have an automatic site failover, file share witness in the 3rd site, it can be Azure. Really great use case for Azure here. Scaling out, so if you have 4 nodes in a DAG and you need more capacity, instead of adding a second DAG or adding more memory or disks to the servers, unless that's really feasible, just add more servers into your DAG. You can scale up to 16 servers. Not that I'm advocating to always use 16 servers, but you can go a long way with a single DAG. So just basically keep it simple, single network card if you're leveraging high quality networks, networking 10 gig Ethernet maybe in your data centers, then definitely use a single network card. DAGs without an administrative access point. One caveat there is that the DAGs without an admin access point might sometimes cause issues with backup software. Then, of course, that brings us to a discussion, do you still want to take backups with Exchange? But let's keep that for a different webinar because that could really carry us a long way. Copies of one last copy and so forth and so on. So really, basically the same principles that Microsoft has been preaching for a while, because that's what it makes more sense to for Exchange. Because if you want to use auto reseed, then definitely deploy a DAG like this. Deploy it on physical hardware because auto reseed on a SAN, although it makes sense from a volume point of view, a single volume failing, I don't see that happen on a SAN really often. Usually it's either the entire SAN going down, unless an administrator maybe did something wrong and yanked out a volume or whatsoever. So it's still helpful there, but it makes less sense. You know what I'm getting to from all the features, protection features that exist for Exchange 2016 and 2013. They're all geared towards a mainly physical exchange kind of carries through into the preferred architecture where Microsoft says, well, hey, take advantage of large disks, give them large mailboxes, even though I don't really see myself having a 100 gig mailbox anytime soon, but it becomes feasible. This being said, keep it simple, right? Make sure that you go with the recommendations. Of course, there's always, every environment is different, every requirement is different, but these things carry a long way. The HA story for Exchange 2016 are definitely much better than Exchange 2013. They are great in 2013, but they're even better in 2016. Of course, there have to be some advantages there. And if you want to go low cost, right, if cost is really something important to you, then leverage commodity hardware. I did the exercise the other day, and the fact that hard disks are so cheap really becomes an interesting discussion, because if you want to host terabytes of data, and that's, of course, if you have a lot of data, then hosting it on it becomes very expensive. Is it an option? Sure, you can host Exchange virtually and have it running on a SAN happily without any issues, especially if you already have a SAN in the capacity. That might make more sense for your environment. But if you don't and you have to purchase that, then definitely take a look at the commodity hardware, as they like to call it, because it makes a lot of sense. Now, this being said, how about Exchange Online? How about that? Well, I mean, think back some of the things that I talked about earlier today, right? In Exchange Online, the future is already here. And I know this kind of sounds peachy, but it is true. Any of the document collaboration features I talked about for Exchange 2016, it's already in Office 365. You have the side-by-side view. You have the ability to upload documents to OneDrive. It was rolled out just recently. Take a look at any of the collaboration features that you have. They are months ahead of time what Exchange 2016 is bringing. And this is very likely how it's going to be for the future. Is that a problem? No. I mean, that's great. If you want to test drive some of these features, take a look at Office 365. The point being here is that from an end user perspective, the productivity perspective, and I'm ignoring all sorts of interactions, in even security perspective, but I'm ignoring all political discussions that might exist or might not exist here. It really makes a lot of sense from a productivity point of view to be in Office 365 there, especially if you, add up all the improvements that are coming in next versions of Exchange. But there's more coming, and I'm focusing on Exchange here, but there's stuff like Delve and the Office Graph that really are important to the future of Exchange and Exchange Online. So those are really interesting changes that are coming there. And there's one spot I think you should be monitoring really close, and that's the roadmap for Office 365. On that website, Microsoft posts what they're rolling out right now, what they have rolled out, and what is coming in the next months. If you take a look at that roadmap, it is really, really interesting to see what's coming down the road. And from different point of views, not only Exchange, but all the other services as well. But I don't want to carry too much over or bleed over into the other services like SharePoint and Link, but they come, they come as one, right? If you want to have the best experience in Exchange 2013, then the recommendation was to have SharePoint 2013 and Exchange 2013 and Link 2013. But deploying all that on premise might take you a while. It might take you a lot of time to invest in and investment in all that to have that on premises and take advantage of it. And maybe by the time you get there, Exchange 2016 is here. And of course, if you want to get the value out of your 2016 deployment, then you'll have to have Exchange 2016, the Office Server, 2016, Skype for Business perhaps. I mean, it always, it retrades and retrades, and it keeps you busy for a while. That is true. But, if you don't have the bandwidth or, you don't have the ability to deploy all that time after time, then again, and I'm not trying to sell you anything here, being quite open about how I experience Exchange Online versus Exchange on premises. And Exchange on premises still has a really important place, right? I mainly deploy deployments. I've been doing for a great way to kind of leverage the best of both worlds. Now, this being said, because I really don't want to go over time because it'll get me in trouble, let's quickly talk about what now does for Exchange 2013 and what we will be doing for Exchange 2016, kind of hanging out there. So for that, I'll be switching over to a quick 2-minute demo. I promise you I won't take too much time, but monitoring is still important if you're running on premises and also if you're running in Office 365, but that's a different discussion. If you're monitoring your servers on premises, then of course servers are important. Anything, from with regards to monitoring to resources definitely is important. But what I want to focus on right now is functionality, because in the end user experience is what matters to you. And the solution that we have kind of focuses on that. So what you can see here is our dashboard, which tells you at the top, the CAS and the DAG health, what the end user experience is like. Right? These indicators tell you green is everything's working. Yellow means end user experience might be impacted. For instance, if you go to the top level dashboard, right now it says degraded. Degraded means functionality-wise for Exchange 2013, there is a problem. Don't go running yet. Things are still up and running, but it might be impacted, it might be slower, or things might not work as you as an administrator expect. And especially in this case, right, what you can see here is that for Exchange 2013, there seems to be a DAG issue. Now, when we dive into this problem here, what you can see is that there is a single DAG in this environment, and in the DAG, there seems to be a problem with the database redundancy, which means that, oh, right, look at this, there is a database down to 2 copies. Is that a problem from your end user experience? No. It is a little bit degraded the experience because they don't get the full protection, but your end users are still working perfectly with Exchange, and that's the thing that I want to that I would like you to take away from this is that doing traditional monitoring about, hey, this component is up and this component is up doesn't really make a lot of sense anymore from a traditional IT perspective. It might, but not from a modern IT perspective, because an IT organization delivers services and you care about how these services perform. And if you deployed Exchange 2013 or Exchange 2016, you want to make sure that you monitor that experience, because you should have built in high availability, which of course tell you what is the end user experience, and then from a second perspective tells you from a server level perspective, that's what you see here, what is affected on my server and how can I solve? That's really what is important. For Exchange 2016, similar to what we did for Exchange 2013, we monitor, we use, for instance, managed availability. We leverage managed availability in addition to our own tests to understand what's happening in the product, right? In Exchange 2016, the get server redundancy command that I see some use cases for that for us. So what I'll definitely be doing is use that ability that we've been given by Microsoft to make better understand better judgment in our product, give you more guidance. For instance, today what we do with that is if a server is placed in maintenance mode in Exchange, right, the server component states there is a component that says server wide offline. Well, if we detect that an Exchange server is in maintenance mode, it will automatically be placed in maintenance mode for our product, which means less things to worry about. And as a busy administrator, that is really what you want to do. So that is really what you don't want to do. You don't want to go into your monitoring solution or tell your monitoring team, hey, I'm doing maintenance on my Exchange server. It's just better that it happens throughout the system, entirely automated. This being said, kind of brings me to the end of the presentation. And as I said in the beginning, we will be giving away some turbo kits for Office 365. We will be giving them away to people who ask questions. So the 10 first good questions will get a free Office 365 Turbo Kit, which includes the Office 365 for Exchange Professionals book written by Tony Redmond, Paul Cunningham, and myself, and where Jeff Guillet did a really, really great job of tech editing. It also contains a lot of other useful resources like white papers, deployment videos, some of the webinars I did, and of course it's an 8 GB flash drive. So in addition to that, anyone who requests a free trial and trials our software will also get a Turbo Kit sent. So you have access to these slides afterwards. It contains the link, so feel free to go there, subscribe, and get a trial. This being said, any questions I can help you with in the remaining 5 minutes?
Well, thank you, Michael. And we do have questions coming in pretty hot and heavy since you mentioned the, the promotion. So let's dive right into those since we're running out of time here. First question, does HCW rely on IE stack setup with security baselines partially having a hard time reading the question here. Does it rely on IT stock settings? Would security baselines potentially impact us?
Well, I'll give you the depends what baselines and what security settings we're talking about. Again, it's just those server connecting to a platform on the internet, downloading some components which are run locally in the server. So I don't think it should have an impact at all. But of course, every environment is different. More than happy to follow up on this feature that isn't yet. So there's only so much I can tell you about that. I don't work for Microsoft, but what I can do is, I'll get the questions afterwards via email, and I'm more than happy to, put you into contact with someone who might be able to answer your question at the Microsoft side.
Very good. Next question is regarding enhanced document collaboration. What happens if Microsoft Rights Management Services is configured?
That is a really good question. I wouldn't know. I mean, I wouldn't know. My best guess is that, of course, and as far as I understood, right, is that rights management services are supported in a certain way, but there are some settings that are not supported. I believe, oh, I have to rethink that. No, you know what? I'll follow up with that question offline because I don't want to be telling you anything I don't know for sure. So I'll have to find out and get back to you, but I'll definitely will.
Fair enough. Next question is, and this question came in fairly early in the presentation. And I know you've touched on this, but perhaps you can kind of clarify or summarize it. The question is, you might get into the Exchange Online part later, but are the 2016 functions included in Exchange Online?
Yes, as I said at the end, Exchange, a lot of the features that you will be getting in Exchange 2016 on premises are already available in Office 365. So, and to be honest, Office 365 has more functionality, some things that you will not be able to get, like clutter, for instance. It's a great feature, keeps your inbox clean, doesn't exist in on premises. So, yeah, it's definitely already there.
Great. Next question. What if you have sites that require their own servers because of the sheer amount of users? Would they go into their own DAG, or would you still stretch it? And
again, it depends. I would always, if you have multiple data centers, right, I would definitely suggest to stretch a DAG across 2 data centers from a high availability perspective so that you can fail over. But of course, there are requirements at play. Imagine that you are an environment that has 2 data centers, but the link between the 2 data centers is crappy to, then stretching a DAG across a crappy WAN link might not be a great idea. Maybe your only option is to have a single DAG at that one location. It's not perfect solution, but it might be better than just having a single server there. So again, there's a lot of things to take into account per environment, so it's really specific. So I'm going to go with it depends, but if you have a strong, 2 data centers and a good connectivity between both, I'd definitely consider using both data centers and just have, copies across both of them.
Okay, next question is, how does archive work in an on-site environment?
So archiving in an on-site environment is similar to how it works today, right? You set up an archive box and then it uses retention policies, or you can manually drag and drop, but retention policies apply. You tag a message and then that message gets sent over to the archive by Exchange itself. Of course, there's intricacies, and I'm taking the shortcut here, but yeah, essentially that's the way it works. I mean, there's a lot more to it, right? You have to make sure that you have retention policies that you assign to a user, and those policies contain the retention tags. And a tag is, for instance, delete all messages in the deleted items after 30 days, move messages in that folder after 60 days, or move all messages after 90 days. That's the concept of tags. But essentially, an archive mailbox is somewhat from a technical perspective, a secondary mailbox that is available to the end user, which is only available if you're connected to the Exchange server. So no offline caching of the archive.
Well, great. Well, we've got a lot of additional questions, and I can tell by looking at a lot of them, it would take more time than we have for you to sufficiently address them. So, as you mentioned, we'll forward those questions on to you for future follow-up. And at this point, on behalf of msexchange.org, Michael, I want to thank you for the typical great presentation that we've come to expect. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today. And of course, we want to thank eNow again for helping us make it possible to bring you today's event. The recording of today's presentation will be available on the msexchange.org site very soon. Watch for that. And also, please watch your email for additional upcoming msexchange.org webinars. So this will conclude today's webinar. Thank you all for attending. You may now disconnect.